The following is a production of UNC Wilmington. Major sponsors are Duke Power, proud to set operational standards and participate in projects that stimulate discussions and partnerships. Weyerhaeuser Company, proud to be a leader in sustainable forest management, resource conservation, and recycling. McKim Creed, working to ensure clean water for the present and future citizens of North Carolina. And Sunspree Resort Wrightsville Beach, working with the community to conserve our natural resources.
Water is renewable, but it's finite, and which means that as populations grow and as economies grow, we start to run into limits as to how much more we can take. And many parts of the world now are at that limit, where their demands are simply at or beyond the available supply of water.
The United Nations says 14,000 people die a day because of poor quality water. 9,500 of them are children. At Columbine High School, we had a tragedy that stunned everyone in the United States, probably in other countries too. But every day, 630 times that many children die needlessly because of poor quality water. Deaths that we could prevent, and we hardly pay attention to it.
If I may, I'd like to quote our Chief of Engineers, Lieutenant General Bob Flowers, who has stated, what oil was to the 20th century, water will be for this century.
And if we don't work together as one, we're going to see not only an ugly fight, but a very, very big failure in our ability to meet our responsibilities to see that the water is provided to our citizens.
That is sort of our future, I think, is to despite whatever happens politically and wars and disease, if we have one common goal as a people on a planet, and we can be, you know, the champions, or we can just be the people who ruin it. And I think it's important to save it.
This is a story about water, the role it plays in our lives, and the crisis we're in. It's a quiet crisis, slowly creeping across continents, including our own. We take water for granted. We never give it a second thought unless there's a drought. Only then do we realize how crucial water is in our lives. But when the rains return and the lakes, rivers, and streams fill up again, we go back to taking water for granted. As strange as it may seem, the welcome rains are unwelcome when they provide us a false sense of security. We went from a blistering drought in the summer of 2002 to relentless rains in the summer of 2003. From a time when crops failed for a lack of rain to a summer where dams broke, bridges severed, and homes flooded. Yet despite these extremes in the weather, despite the appearance of abundance, the crisis over water scarcity is real. And unless we act soon, the struggle for water will become a part of daily life for us, as it is for so many other people in the world. Oceans cover 2/3 of the planet's surface and account for 97% of its water. Unfortunately, it's salt water, unfit for human use. Approximately 2% of the available water is locked in polar ice sheets and glaciers. That means that life must be sustained with less than 1% of the world's water. This fraction of 1% has to meet the needs of an exploding world population, feed the water appetite of growing economies, and ensure that children do not have to suffer and die needlessly. Without that small fraction of fresh water, life as we know it would no longer be possible. We are made up mostly of water, and so are most other living things. We can last about a month without food, but less than a week without water. We use water in and for nearly everything. Industry, agriculture, human consumption, and recreation. Water plays a wonderfully ordinary role in our lives. Yet it has also played a key role in human history. Water was basic to exploration, making the discovery of new worlds possible. It's also a workhorse and a highway, moving goods, a crucial player in international commerce. Battles have been fought on water and over water. We also fear water, aware of its extraordinary power to destroy. Floods sweep away cities as well as civilizations. Hurricanes savage coasts. Yet we have also looked to water as a way to understand ourselves better. Throughout the ages, water and nature have served as an inspiration for artists.
It's about being there and being involved in the noises and the creatures, the sounds of the water and the wind, and the light, seeing the light and the shades of color that repeat through the scene. There are definitely times when I am awe-inspired. I mean, an owl sitting on a branch near me, just staring at me. A hawk that just seemed to follow me around for a while and yell at me. The beaver at night come out, swim, and try to scare you off. Have you ever seen a beaver slam the water with his tail in the moonlight and the water goes spraying up over it? But I don't know as a race how we can find any kind of equilibrium with the planet if we aren't experiencing it firsthand.
In the ancient past, we saw what we looked like in our reflection in the water. Today, the water looks back at us. Troubled water, the result of our own lack of understanding and care. Sandra Postel is director of the Global Water Policy Project in Amherst, Massachusetts.
You've written about the fact that we are entering an era of water scarcity. What do you mean by that?
We're entering a period of water scarcity mainly because population and economic growth have reached the point where we're overtapping the water that's available from nature.
Overtapping is diminishing what water is available in underground places called aquifers. Aquifers exist underground in various places around the globe. They are the source of water for wells, and in times of drought, they refill dried up streams, rivers, and lakes. Aquifers are as old as the earth and take millions of years to fill. Taking water out of aquifers began to accelerate with the discovery of steam power and then of electricity. Water could be pumped out of the ground around the clock. Then came new and even more powerful techniques learned from oil drilling. Water can now be pumped in huge quantities from an even greater depth in the earth. Today, numerous cities, industries, and farms take water directly from the aquifers. What took nature millions of years to make, we are taking in a few short centuries. Let's examine two major causes of the current crisis over water. One cause is the world's population growth. The more people, the more water needed for consumption and for growing food. Agriculture alone takes nearly 3/4 of that fraction of 1% of water available to the entire planet.
The problem is that in areas that are now heavily irrigated, we see all kinds of signs that that irrigation is not sustainable. Farmers are over-pumping groundwater, in order to grow the crops that they're trying to grow. Rivers are being overtapped in large part to irrigate land. If you look at the water supply globally, 70% of everything we're using is for irrigated agriculture. So it consumes the lion's share of the water that we're using.
World population was 2.5 billion in 1950, but climbed to 4.4 billion in 1980. Today, that figure is 6.2 billion and growing by 80 million people a year. Experts predict an increase to 8 billion by the year 2025. A second cause of the crisis is that water is unevenly divided around the world.
Countries like China and India have had very rapid population growth. They both have over 1 billion people, but not as much water as some of the other parts of the world. So they're facing a very serious water shortage.
Even if water is available, there are many countries that lack the resources to obtain it or to make it safe for drinking. On the other hand, development in the lifestyles of the richer nations translates into an overuse of water. It's used in pools, air conditioning, for lawns. Water consistently is not even in the top 10 things Americans worry about. The average American uses 110 gallons of water per day. Through conservation, that could be cut dramatically. But even if cut in half, we would still be consuming more than 10 times the amount used in some parts of the globe where people have less than 3 gallons per day. Water problems are compounded when the land is paved over and the forests cut. Nearly everyone we talked with stressed the importance of trees in the water cycle. Worldwide, 40 million acres of forest are lost each year. In the United States, the problem has been mitigated through reforestation. Trees and vegetation are vital to water preservation and quality. Forests and plants cushion the earth in times of rain, allowing the water to seep into the ground rather than run off, leading to erosion or worse, flooding. The international scope of water scarcity is alarming. By 2025, 2/3 of the world's population is likely to live in countries with moderate or severe water shortages. Though the rains have returned, the drought of 2002 in the United States revealed just how threatening our own water problems have become. In 2002, the wells ran dry out west, and we saw ranchers sell off their herds rather than watch them die of thirst. The 2002 drought began to shatter North Carolina's complacency about water. Once considered a water-rich state, the drought showed us that we too had taken this irreplaceable resource for granted. Conditions were so severe that some towns were hours away from running out of water.
And what happened, there were so many competing uses upstream from us that basically the water level in the river stopped. We did not have any water coming down. Our intakes were actually above the level of water, so we could not draw anything in for the drinking water system for Vass. And so we had to scramble around a little bit to get some. We actually had to truck water in for a day using the volunteer fire departments to bring water in, to actually pour in the river, to pump up to our treatment plant to treat it.
I came down here as a kid in the early 40s, 40, 41. And I've been coming off and on ever since.
I never have seen it like this in the summertime. And I've been coming down here for 25 years.
The ducks are gone, spiders are gone, the lake bugs are gone. It's just, it's devastating. You know, I have children coming up to me crying, asking me why I can't do something because the fish are dying. Now, what do I say?
The drought was so severe that Governor Mike Easley became the first Southern governor to ask the federal government for agricultural drought relief. Governor, what led to your decision in July of 2002 to ask for federal drought relief for North Carolina?
Well, in July was pretty much through the agricultural season so that we could see there was going to be a lot of agricultural damage. We don't usually ask for disaster relief, as you know, until the season's over and we can calculate what the damages are. But in the middle of July and the corn's not up, or it hasn't pollinated, or the soybeans are dead, all of those type things, we know we can calculate immediately. So I wanted to start asking for disaster relief immediately.
Is there been any calculation of what the drought costs North Carolina in terms of losses, agricultural and other kinds of losses?
Well, just directly with agriculture, somewhere between 350 and 400 million. We lost, you know, farmers work on 2 and 3% production rate, yield, and profit. We lost 25 to 60% of the yield in most counties. Some counties, of course, you lost it all on some crops. However, at the same time, we lost a lot of livestock due to the fact that the pastures weren't giving us any yield. The other thing that people forget is the economic loss from business. Not only nurseries, landscaping business, those things associated with water in that regard, but also our manufacturing businesses. So many of those that require water that's not recycled had to cut back on their hours, on their production. And then even if you weren't in the central coastal plain or Piedmont, down on the coast where they had plenty of water, or at least much more, the lack of water upstream was causing the salt water to back up, and then Weyerhaeuser and other institutions couldn't use the water, and then people started getting brackish water in the water system. So it hit us pretty hard in ways that we really can't, at this point, calculate.
Water is essential to survival. So critical has the issue of water become that the United Nations recently declared water scarcity and water quality to be among the world's most serious threats to peace.
Senator Jeff Bingaman and I.
Former Senator Paul Simon has examined this issue.
The intelligence agencies, the CIA, the Military Intelligence Agency, and the others got together, and they do this periodically for the president. They give an assessment where we're going to be in 15 years. And their assessment was that in 15 years, the great resource shortage in the world is not going to be oil, but water. And regional conflicts are likely to take place over water.
Control over who gets water is driving some of the worst fighting in the Middle East. For example, part of the reason Israel wants to keep the occupied territories is because these lands provide 40% of its water needs. But the Palestinians and the adjoining Arab countries are equally desperate for water and want the lands back. Conflict over who gets water and how much is a problem everywhere, not just in the Middle East. The United States has its own international concerns with bordering Mexico. Though not as severe as in some places around the globe, it is nevertheless a growing concern. Mexico's population continues to soar, and with it, so have demands for water. A bilateral treaty says Mexico is supposed to divert water from the Rio Grande to Texas. But there isn't much water left from the river after Mexico uses what it needs for its burgeoning population. A treaty also dictates that Mexico is supposed to get water from the Colorado River, but by the time the river reaches Mexico, there's barely a trickle left. Border disputes over water are also occurring within the United States and have throughout its history. The most serious of these involve the Colorado River. The 7 states through which the Colorado passes are experiencing extraordinary population growth and lush economic times. Cities such as Phoenix and Las Vegas have literally grown out of the desert. But there isn't enough water to go around, and legal battles over water are escalating. With those 7 states wanting more and more water, California has become desperate. The time may come when California will be forced to choose between providing water for its growing cities or for its bountiful farmland. Because North Carolina shares and competes for the same water resources with bordering Virginia and South Carolina, we have our own set of interstate problems. Rapidly growing South Carolina gets at least 1/3 of its water from streams and rivers that originate in North Carolina. The PD and the Catawba rivers are among the main suppliers of South Carolina's water. The Catawba has the larger population base. Development is booming in the Catawba region, especially around Charlotte. Cities, industries, and homeowners require water and electricity to grow. There are more than 36 municipal water supply intakes along the river. Yet growth also means millions of gallons of treated wastewater are discharged into the watershed daily. Non-point pollution, when water runoff picks up pollutants and deposits them into the river, is also a growing concern. The result is that water declines in both quality and quantity by the time it reaches South Carolina. Duke Power has 13 dams and 11 lakes on the Catawba. Some environmental groups oppose dams both here and worldwide on grounds that they upset nature's balance and the health of river systems. Duke Power's dams generate electricity to meet the growing needs of the region and keep water flow fairly constant. The dams also keep flooding to a minimum during heavy rains, thus helping both North and South Carolina. North Carolina's struggles with neighboring Virginia were of a different sort. What happened was that Virginia Beach's population began to mushroom, and with it, the need for water.
Well, historically, the forces that have caused the military and the population and the industry to locate here have been the confluence of the James River, the Chesapeake Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean, all of which are salty in the southeast Virginia and Hampton Roads region. We're also very flat. Well, this makes it an ideal place to site jet bases, an ideal place to port aircraft carriers, an ideal place for the largest coal exporting port in the nation. But beginning in the late 70s, we started to find that the Norfolk system was unable to meet our demands. And ultimately, in the 1980-81 drought, the city was rationing water and on the verge of shutting down industries. And so the city launched on an effort to solve this water supply problem.
After dozens of studies and months of debate, Virginia Beach concluded that the only workable solution was to build a 76-mile pipeline from Lake Gaston. Lake Gaston is located approximately 125 miles west of Virginia Beach. It is the second reservoir in a series of 3 which straddle the Virginia-North Carolina state line.
I think the property owners came here because of the plan for the lake. It was a constant level lake. It was high-quality water. It was a rural environment with a beautiful recreation area. That's why most of us came here to develop property, and particularly in retirement and in recreation.
People around the lake were extremely agitated. They didn't want us to take the water. Our position was that they wouldn't notice the difference. This was a very small amount of water from a very large resource.
Technically, the process of taking water from one basin and discharging it into another is called interbasin transfer.
I felt then, and I still feel, that we should not be moving water across interbasin transfers. We should not be using the water of one system to help with another, and particularly when that help is to allow urban growth. Urban growth should be managed with the resources that are available rather than taking someone's resources to provide what's needed.
The decision to build the pipeline sparked a 15-year battle involving Roanoke River Basin lobbyists, angry North Carolinians, and federal agencies.
Our organization, the Roanoke River Basin Association, has argued all along that they're not entitled to that water because that entity does not exist within this river basin. Therefore, we have a violation of the doctrine of riparian rights in as much as they don't exist in this basin, but also we have coming out of that interbasin transfer, which we view as extra legal.
It became a multi-million-dollar legal war between the states.
We hired a lawyer. The Virginia Beach had batteries of lawyers. We used public response and newspapers and television to try to bring the issue forward, hopefully to gain support for our side that this should not be done.
If federal judges allow Virginia Beach to build a pipeline, then what is there to keep other municipalities such as Raleigh, such as Durham, such as Chapel Hill from trying to eye with envy and possibly even building a car to the same river system?
Virginia Beach eventually won the legal battle, and in 1997, water from Lake Gaston began to arrive, providing the city with 50% more water than it had before.
Looking back at it, North Carolina did what any state would do. They would have done what Virginia would have done, or Virginia Beach would have done if positions had been reversed. Virginia Beach did what it had to do, and I've seen conflicts in Texas and Oklahoma, and some conflicts brewing between South and North Carolina, and down in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida that are almost exact mirrors of the Virginia Beach, North Carolina conflict.
In some ways, North Carolina is the world in miniature. We share some of the same problems as other states and other countries. Seeing ourselves in miniature may be helpful in better understanding the plight of others, but in a more practical way, it may also help us as we seek solutions here at home. Water levels here at High Rock Lake dropped by 24 feet during the 2002 drought, and grass grew where boats had once stocked. Marina owners watched their businesses go from bad to worse as property values fell all around the lake. Some owners objected to being taxed for waterfront property when it no longer existed, and others considered a class action suit over their property valuations. The Alcoa Company controls the water levels at the lake. It uses the water to generate electrical power. During the extreme drought of 2002, Alcoa lived up to its licensing agreement and released only half the normal downstream amount. That's when the trouble began. The lowered lake levels had a devastating effect on all kinds of small businesses.
Our lake end of the business is gone, totally gone. It will come back when the water comes back, but it's down about $300,000 just from the lake side. Our campground side is down 25 to 30%. We have those campers that didn't come for fishing or boating that are still coming, but those that were lake-related campers, they are not coming. Now, they've told us, let us know when the lake comes back and we'll be back.
Residents and small businesses filed complaints with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission about the way Alcoa was managing the lake. What they wanted was a change in the licensing agreement. They got it in December 2002 when the commission ruled that in times of drought, Alcoa could no longer drop lake levels more than 5 feet.
Well, our hopes are that everyone has learned something from this. The lake will come back up, it will take rain, but perhaps all of the entities downstream have learned to better manage the lake, because in the end, everyone is going to suffer from this. Not just High Rock, it's going to be drought problems all the way down to Myrtle Beach. So hopefully we'll learn and not let this happen again.
North Carolinians, as do others around the country and the world, get their water in a variety of ways. Some draw directly from rivers. others from shallow wells, and still others by drilling deep into the aquifers. Man-made reservoirs are also an alternative. Reservoirs are artificially created bodies of water, usually designed with a dam to hold back or release water from a river.
But what we found with all these projects, regardless of what their original purpose was, they today serve many purposes: flood control, power production, water quality, water storage, to allow us to improve or control the impact downstream of the ecosystem, to protect against the intrusion of saltwater wedges and the impact upstream from that, and it also upstream from these dams in some way to provide economic benefit in terms of recreation, marine operations, fishing, additionally. So these are clearly multi-purpose projects.
These man-made projects are also a water lifeline to cities such as Greensboro.
You know, many of our towns were built on the rail lines, and rail lines usually run along the ridges, and it's pretty dry up on the ridges, and so towns like Durham and Greensboro are not blessed by nature in having lots of water nearby.
Though few people knew it, the drought of 2002 actually began in the summer of 1997. Greensboro has no natural water supply, and emergency officials realized that trouble was close at hand. When the drought hit Greensboro in full force in 2002, the city immediately imposed both voluntary and mandatory restrictions and launched an ambitious conservation program. But none of this was enough. Greensboro's main water hope always lay in the construction of the Randleman Reservoir. This new water source was vital to the city's long-term survival. Upon its completion, engineers predict a dependable 50-year water supply for Greensboro and adjacent communities. The reservoir covers 3,000 acres. There's another 3,000 acres of buffer, consisting of a strip approximately 200 feet wide around the reservoir to protect water quality. The project was costly and not without controversy. Although it was for the common good, there was a personal cost.
I was told that the dam would not affect me personally to the point to where I would have to move. Okay, originally. It would take a portion of the land, but as far as having to move, I was told that they would work with me in whatever way they could to go and make sure that what I wanted, I would be able to get by with. I wound up having to move because I was told they just weren't going to put a road in for me, and that there was no alternative. I'd have to move.
They have what they're asking. We have what we think is fair market value. And obviously, depending on whether you're buying or selling, those numbers may be far apart.
I had 3 payments left on my house. I would have been out of debt physically, you know, with the big payments. And now I'm back into debt for the next 30 years, and being almost 54 years old, that's, you know, not something to look forward to.
You know, the main thing is that these kinds of projects guarantee that, you know, for the next 50 years, that you have a stable, long-term source of water. It creates, I think, mainly a sense of stability in the region.
I hate that all the people lost all of their, especially the big farmers, the large farmers that had a lot of land that had been in families for hundreds of years. I hate that, but I think overall it's going to help the community. I know it'll help the fishing tackle and hunting industry considerably in this area. But overall, I think it's more pros than cons.
The Randleman Project may be the last such project in North Carolina. Experts cite the lack of suitable space, growing public opposition, and environmental roadblocks. But the project yielded a considerable benefit. Despite differences, there was general recognition that water scarcity was a problem. Cooperation and compromise emerged and will be essential for our water future.
To my knowledge, it's one of the few times that 6 different governments have come together voluntarily to create a water supply and to have a regional approach, which I think is probably going to be the model for how these things are done.
Raleigh, North Carolina, the state capital. Bordered by Durham, the Research Triangle Park, and Cary, it's known as the Triangle. It's also known as one of the fastest growing regions in the country. People come here for jobs, good schools, culture, and a high quality of life. Population growth in the Triangle from 1990 to 1997 was 13.2%, compared to the statewide increase of 12%. In addition, there was a 43% increase in the amount of developed land in the area. Estimated water usage for the region is expected to increase 95% by 2020. It was hoped that the Lake Jordan project would take care of the enormous demand for water. B. Ever Jordan Reservoir, located just west of Raleigh, is a multi-purpose facility. In addition to supplying water, it was designed for flood control, recreation, and wildlife conservation. This area is at the upper end of the Cape Fear River Basin, and the man-made lake collects water from the Haw and New Hope rivers. 2/3 of Jordan Lake is set aside for downstream flow, contributing to the Cape Fear River. Growth is occurring not only in the Raleigh area, but all along the river, including Wilmington. More people, more development strains water quality and water supply.
The needs of Wilmington have changed, as well as the upstream needs of the people in the Piedmont and the coastal plain have changed. And what's essentially happened is that the development upstream has meant that there's more pressure on the water coming downstream, so that what we get is not exactly the same quantity or quality. Now, from the downstream side, Wilmington, in an effort to develop, has enlarged its harbor, changed the depth and the width of the river, and all of that activity has let saltwater come far upstream. So where Wilmington once sat on a freshwater river, now it sits in an estuary, which is saline.
As saltwater enters, it kills all those ecosystems that are dependent on freshwater. This is happening all over the world.
And what you see as the salt starts to come in, you see the tree rings get smaller and smaller and smaller. And they reach a point where you see most of these, they have limited canopies, just a few branches. Trees don't die like animals do. They don't die all at once. They'll have branches die, and ultimately there'll just be one branch left, and then the last one goes.
North Carolina's water problems are not all the same. The topography dictates differences, as does population density, and even what's underground in those aquifers we talked about earlier. When aquifer depletion becomes serious, the state can step in. Are we standing on top of an aquifer here?
Yeah, there are lots of aquifers here. As a matter of fact, if you were to drill a deep hole here, you'd find almost 1,000 feet of sand, silt, and clay beneath this spot. And in that sequence, we can probably define 5 or 6 really high-quality aquifers.
Are we draining these aquifers? I mean, are they? We hear that they're going down in size or depth or whatever.
Over the last 15 to 20 years, our water levels have been declining in this area at rates of 2 to 4 feet per year. Further south in the New Bern and Jacksonville area, they're declining at 6 feet per year. And further south still, near the South Carolina border, some of our aquifers show water level declines of in excess of 10 feet per year.
This is especially serious in coastal areas where salt water can intrude. Aquifer depletion in the central coastal plain area became so serious that the state did, in fact, step in. The area was on the verge of running out of water and may have jeopardized its underground water supply for generations to come.
What we've discovered is that over a period of decades, we have taken out more water than can recharge. And so it's like having a big bank account and a small income. And, you know, one day your banker calls up and says, I'm sorry, son, but you're going to be broke next week. And so the solution to that is that we have to gradually reduce the amount of water we're withdrawing from those aquifers. And that's what the permit system does. The other equally important part of the solution is that these communities need to develop other water sources that will be sustainable for their future needs.
The Division of Water Resources convened a stakeholder group made up of a cross-section of water users to work toward a common solution. The work of this stakeholder group resulted in the Capacity Use Area Rule, which requires that large water users in the central coastal plain reduce their reliance on these aquifers by as much as 75% over the next 16 years. Although the rule was necessary, it placed a considerable hardship on the people in the central coastal plain. These 15 counties, some of the poorest in North Carolina, now have to find alternative sources of water, which can be extremely expensive.
There is definitely a technological solution for each of those 36 most affected communities. Several of those solutions are going to cost big bucks. And understanding the underlying economy of the area is imperative on the part of those that are going to make political decisions and funding decisions for these alternatives as we go forward.
Kinston, North Carolina had the most serious groundwater depletion problem of all the communities in the central coastal plain. Yet Kinston has led a cooperative effort to establish a new water authority. The plan is to use water from the Neuse River as a regional resource, thus helping Kinston and their neighbors. Do you think rural communities or smaller communities like Kinston face problems that are not faced by larger cities? Are your problems different?
I think that we have to approach them differently. We don't have the growth in population to offset some of those costs, and we don't have the revenue stream that most do, so we have to find some efficiencies to do this, and the collaboration among us together it gives us the strength we need to do that.
Rural communities all throughout North Carolina are facing water issues. Many towns need new and updated facilities, but in many cases, they simply can't afford it.
Well, in the last 5 or 6 years, we got our first wake-up call when we went out and inventoried the water and sewer systems of the state in 1996 and 97, which, by the way, the Rural Center did, and we were glad to do. But we inventoried each community's water system and its sewer system, and we found we had an $11 billion problem in terms of the cost to upgrade our water and sewer systems to meet existing pollution standards. Now, that's $11 billion.
The ability of rural communities and small towns to pay more disappeared when textile and other businesses closed down. Now, there's no money available from taxpayers or townships to pay for new water treatment plants. State grants and loans for such projects are practically non-existent. And as of the year 2000, the federal government terminated its involvement in these matters. Though the crisis is real, much is being done with respect to helping resolve our water problems. Some of the solutions being tried here and around the world involve technology. With salt water covering 97% of the Earth's surface, many people believe the answer to our water crisis is turning salt water into fresh water. The technical term for the process is desalination, and it's being used in various places around the globe.
Desalinated water is available in almost every area where you have a problem. California has a problem. All kinds of water right at their doorsteps. Texas is going to have a problem in a very few years. All kinds of water right at their doorstep. Middle East, all kinds of problems, all kinds of water right there. But it is still too expensive to generally use, but we're gradually improving it. But we need governments and we need private companies to do more research.
A modified version of desalination is being tried with success, but it's with so-called brackish water, which is water close to the ocean but considerably less salty than seawater. Brackish water is also much less expensive to purify. Dare County is home to the famous Lost Colony, the Wright Brothers Flight, and the beloved Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. It's a tourist mecca, but the area is adjacent to the ocean and it sits on salt water. It had to do something to provide for its own residents and the great influx of tourists. The county's approach? Purified brackish water, of which it had plenty, through a process known as reverse osmosis.
Well, we use reverse osmosis membranes, and the membranes we have reject over 99% of all the minerals from the water. And we operate at a 75% product recovery. 3 out of every 4 gallons that come into the plant produce drinking water. The other gallon washes away the minerals that are removed in the process.
Along with technology, better planning is on the agenda for the future.
We will step in and help you, but let me tell you, I want our investments in that regard to be long-term, not patchwork. I don't want it to get us, through the fall, into the spring, and then we got problems again the spring and the summer. We need to fix our system statewide, and we need to be looking long-term at everything that we do.
Another area we need to take a hard look at is how much we pay for water. Because we thought it was an infinite resource, cost didn't matter much. But the more precious this resource becomes, it inevitably will cost more.
As we develop new water sources, we'll be buying land at what it cost in 2002, not what it cost in 1950. The cost of energy and electricity is much higher, the cost of chemicals for water treatment. And so it's just inevitable that water will cost more. I think we need to develop some kind of a system to perhaps have a basic water rate for that would protect low-income and retired people from excessive water rate increases.
Perhaps our greatest hope lies in conservation. Let's talk a little bit about solutions. You very evocatively titled your book, The Last Oasis. What is the last oasis?
The last oasis refers to the idea that we can't keep looking for more water, that we have to look more carefully at how we can better manage and more wisely use the water that we already have access to. And there are a whole range of things that involves that we're just now beginning to look at and tap into.
Talk to me about some of those.
Well, conservation technologies are a good example. There are many efficient technologies in irrigation, in industries, that we can use in our homes that we're just not using to the extent that maximizes their potential. A good example is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is about the most efficient method we know of to irrigate crops. It's a system of tubing that delivers water at very low volumes, very low pressures, directly to the roots of plants. And so you're virtually eliminating evaporation losses and eliminating the kind of wasteful runoff that you can have when you're just flooding fields with water.
Another solution being tried is water reuse. Water that's already been used is treated and used again before being put back into the rivers. By using water more than once, we expand its supply. Reclaimed water can be used for many purposes. Though not always drinkable, it can be of service, especially in preserving our underground water supply. Among other things, reclaimed water can be used for lawns, shrubberies, car washes, and golf courses. In Craven County, for example, reclaimed water is used to irrigate recreational areas. This reduces the need to tap into groundwater. There are also cities and towns which are implementing innovative conservation programs.
People have to know why it's important to use water wisely. So we had the education programs we go out and do in the elementary schools. We have workshops for adults, and we have our block leader program. And to our knowledge, it's the only town in the country that's using the block leader program to educate neighbors about water conservation. We also have incentives. You know, a lot of people are going to reduce their water use because it affects their pocketbook. So we have the tiered rate structure where the more you use, the more you're going to pay. We have the alternate day watering ordinance, which is everybody has 3 days a week to water. We have a rain sensor ordinance, which requires rain sensors on irrigation systems so they're not watering while it's raining. And then we have a water waste ordinance. So people can't be watering so long it's running down the streets and you know, using a precious resource wastefully.
We need to treat water differently and better.
To me, the water and the air are going to be issues that will cross all boundaries, all worldviews, and hopefully will unite people. You know, what other two topics are so central? We can't live without water, we can't live without air.
I like to look at more of it as a responsibility on the part of every single citizen to do what they can to make sure that we have the water we need not only in North Carolina, but in the nation and the world.
There's an ethical dimension to every decision we make about how to use it and how to manage it. And it requires that we understand that every living thing needs an adequate amount of water for their survival, which means sharing water with each other as people, as countries that neighbor each other and share a river, or as one species among millions on the planet, that we have to learn to share what's there.
I have often joked that if I have a gravestone, someday I would like it to read, "Where there's life, there's hope." And I think the river is a metaphor for life.
No single technology or no single strategy is going to solve all of our water problems. Instead, it will take a combination of strategies and technology. It will also take a new awareness of the central role of water in our lives. Every city, every town, every industry, every farm, every individual will have to examine the way in which they use water and commit themselves to use it more efficiently. Most essentially, it will take cooperation between all of us.
There's a lot of trouble in the world today. Everywhere I turn, people losing faith. A lot of hungry children, a lot of wars are fought. So many people die without a second thought. But I know deep inside there's enough here for everyone. There's enough love if we take care of each other and we try to understand. No matter how we live our lives, this is holy land. We can make the world a better place for our sons and daughters when we all can finally say, this is sacred water. Sacred water. It's hard to imagine a world without pain. try